A lot can happen between falling in love with a house online and owning it, between imagining living there and breathing in your new home for the first time. Having an advocate who can help you navigate the complex world of financing, inspections, negotiating, analyzing the market, and talking through any anxieties that may pop up, that can make all the difference. That's what the expertise of a Realtor can do for you. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors and bound by a code of ethics, because that's who we are.
Price drop? Time to shop. Get to a Nordstrom Rack store today for first dibs on new markdowns. Now score even more, up to 70% off brands everyone loves at Nordstrom Rack. Denim, dresses, sneakers, tops, and more. Plus, get genius deals on jackets, sweaters, and boots for the whole family. Shop your Nordstrom Rack store today and save up to 70% with new markdowns. But hurry, deals this great won't last.
It's time for the initial, we've been waiting for this for so long, and I know a lot of folks have, the Doomsday Podcast. And here we are live from, it's not really live, plausibly live from Uptown. And I'm joined by my co-host. He was a little concerned when I said it was my podcast with him, Ed Werder.
I wasn't concerned the first time you said it. I became concerned as you continued to say it without it ever being challenged. And so I just thought to establish a legal foundation for an eventual lawsuit, should this ever amount to anything of any consequence, of any value, and I wanted to sue you for its rights, I wanted to have an admission early on that you misspoke in calling it yours.
Things will obviously, they will end poorly, but we're starting off on the right track, and this is, I'm very excited about this. Two enormous guests involved in the program today that you'll be hearing from, and we'll be bringing them on here in a little while.
We've blown our whole guest fee budget for the year on these two guys today in the first show.
I hope you have something in your wallet. I don't know about this guest fee, what that means. But, Rick Gosselin will be joining us, and Hall of Fame guy that he is. The Talk of Fame network is where you
he is a Hall of Fame voter.
He's a Hall of Fame voter for many years. He's been, somehow inducted into the Hall of Fame in Canton. There's a lot of things involved with him. And then also Chris Mortensen, our good friend who is, thankfully, and we're so grateful, has really fought so hard with the throat cancer, and he's going to be back on ESPN where he belongs for this draft, and you'll be hearing him right here. But, Ed, I just want to say, what I want out of the Doomsday Podcast is...
Which is a tip of the fedora, Tom Landry's fedora, to the great defenses of the 70s and 80s that Tom Landry coached and the Cowboys won their initial Super Bowls with. It's not, as I said previously, some kind of reference to my general pessimistic attitude about the Cowboys. Because they had a really good year last year, and we know that seldom do they fail.
Someone was worried that the Doomsday Podcast would, just the name, in fact, would bring in a lot of the end-of-the-world types. And so
we'll take them if we can get them, though,
that's
right?
fine. That's fine.
Okay.
I mean, we want everybody we can get. But I think I'm glad you said that. The Doomsday Podcast is a reference. And in fact... Boy, that caricature, or what would we call that logo that had, I thought it was a perfect likeness of you.
The cartoon character that you commissioned someone to draw an excellent portrayal of you.
Large. Yeah.
You look outstanding in that. It's a great replication of you. I thought my dental work was a little overdone.
You thought your teeth looked a little better than that.
They were bigger than John Elway's. I think it's a fair point.
Don't make fun of Elway's teeth.
I wasn't.
No, but I mean, that's your guy.
I leave that to Brian Bosworth.
That's your guy, Elway. My gosh, that whole Denver connection. But speaking of that, by the way, as we begin the Doomsday Podcast, and as we go, we're going to let you know all about how to hear us, all the various ways you can reach out to us. Ed, that we roll this out You'll be hearing this the day before, or maybe even, who knows, if we really get on our horse, it could be 2 days before the draft. But what an exciting time. Now, I understand, Ed, after many, many years of spending time at Valley Ranch, now it's the Star, you are going to be making a trip to New Orleans. You will still be very plugged in to what's going on with the Cowboys. It's strange. For so many years, the Cowboys have had some picks about here, somewhere in the 20s. But I don't know how you've experienced this. Last year, getting that 4th overall pick, man, that brought a whole different approach to the deal. I think Cowboys fans, though they shouldn't be let down, but because it means they had a good season and they're picking 28th, I think it's just you go from this level of excitement, we're going to get a game-changing type player, to what's the 28th pick. And what I will say, and what we'll talk to Goose Gosselin about coming up, some of these teams that do this every year and pick about 27, 28, I think of the Steelers as a team that, I think of New England obviously picking there. What do? They sit there and they let these really good players just come to them. Do you think Jerry Jones in this draft will be capable of doing that, or will it be, hey,
wheeling and dealing?
Well, I'm not even saying that. It's the old, if some guy starts dropping, if some guy gets scared, let's say, Reuben Foster, I know he had to run in Indy. I don't think he's going to, he's not going to come plummeting that much. But if somebody sort of like that came rolling down that board, it's going to be impossible. It's impossible for him.
What if a guy like O.J. Howard, the tight end, fell that far, which seems equally unlikely? I think going into this draft, the Cowboys have to take the approach, and most people say that this is what the approach should have been last year, of drafting to improve their defense. And they did that last year in what to me was a very sensible way, in drafting Ezekiel Elliott 4th overall rather than taking Jalen Ramsey, because they knew they could dictate how often he was involved in touching the ball and determining the outcome ultimately of games, and it was a very effective, intelligent approach. But now I think it's clear, given that their two best teams the last couple of years, one quarterback by Tony Romo, one quarterback by Dak Prescott, both met their demise in the divisional round of the playoffs because they could not stop, ultimately, Aaron Rodgers and couldn't pressure him, that they have got to get defensive players who can make a difference in this draft.
Having said the whole O.J. Howard, if somebody like that with that sort of talent level slip down there, I think they would. And again, that gets into the argument. Hey, if that's the guy on your board, even if you know how desperate you needed,
well, we know they've
help.
Ignored their board before, or Sharif Floyd would be a nose tackle for the Cowboys right now, right? And Johnny Manziel would be the quarterback, and what fun we would be having on this podcast if that were the case.
Some of the greatest moments were when Jerry was talked out of things. And by the way, that Sharif Floyd, that's the year they moved down and ended up getting the offensive lineman, right? I mean, that's
Zach
kind of
Martin.
And no, it was Frederick. Yeah, Frederick.
That's right.
But I'm telling you, this offensive line thing, at least they sort of got into a strategy. It's like, we're going to revamp this offensive line. Now, can you do that at the detriment of your defense? Can you maybe one of these days find a second-round pick who doesn't have a nerve issue, their nerves firing, or doesn't, smoke a lot of pot? I mean, it's, this is become an issue.
Doesn't do it at the wrong time.
There is a right time. Like
well, I'm not saying there's a right time, but there sometimes are better than others based on the NFL schedule.
True.
The testing period has just now begun. So
yes. But some of these guys seem to.
I thought it was interesting. The NFLPA put out an advisory or put on their Twitter page a notice to all players that the testing period was beginning right now.
Yeah.
So let's see how many guys can read 140 characters.
I thought that was for the writers that they put that set out. Now I think it's very appropriate to bring on with his second round, because he had a great column about this the other day. You know him, you love him. For many years, the NFL draft guru for the Dallas Morning News, even draft rooms, they'll have his top 100. It's up on the wall. The mock draft, Goose's final mock draft, it is Rick Goose Gosselin, who we both work for. I used to share an office
Worked
with.
for? I didn't never work for Goose.
We
I
both
worked with Goose.
We worked
you
with
may have
him.
worked for him.
Yeah, I pretty much did.
I always thought myself as kind of the equal of the people on our staff, but I can see why you would not put yourself in that company.
I was sort of a junior member of the morning news staff, and
That's what happens when you come in as a high school writer, right? And you grow up in the system. They always kind of see you that way.
You
right?
don't have to say
no
it
matter
so
what
much.
stage you advance to in your career, they always see you as a guy you came in as.
Yeah.
And Goose came in as a Cowboys beat writer, and so did I, and so I guess that's why some people see us differently even to this day.
My goodness.
Did that sound sanctimonious, Goose?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
No, that's probably why I'll be covering Carter this coming season. I think things are going to go full circle.
The great thing about sharing an office with Mosley, he was never there, so it was a private office.
He was never there on time.
He was never there, period.
And there was always coffee.
In typical fashion, as we get into this with Goose, I did beg because I had a little cubicle, and suddenly they gave me this little column. It was like an internet column. It wasn't like, the full-blown thing, but Mosley, you're going to be a columnist. And so I got it in my head, well, I need an appropriate office for this. And they put
You were going to be a columnist?
They put me in there with Goose. And
I don't know. Where's Blackie Sherrod's office? Where's Frank Luxa sitting?
Oh, man, talk about a great man, my mentor. Anyway, so I begged for this office. And you're right, I never showed up to the office that I begged for. And plus, one day I was going to put some stuff up. And you should have seen it. Goose had 5 filing cabinets full of all this draft stuff. There was nowhere I could put anything. I had one little phone, and that was it. Maybe a notepad. Goose, welcome.
All that to say, welcome, Goose.
Welcome to the Doomsday Podcast. I know how much of an honor this must be for you. And Goose,
our first in-studio guest.
Yeah, to come in studio.
I'm honored.
And what a studio it is. Wish they would cool
About
it.
the size of our office, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Wish they'd cool it down a little bit here for us.
And Goose has got, people can't see it because we don't have the video component yet. I'm sure that's down the road. But he's got his laptop opened up. He's got all these color-coded charts.
Yes.
And I just can't wait to see how many of those we can bring out of it.
What is, right now on your screen? I can't see it. Goose, give us just a quick summary of what you're looking at.
The history of pass rushers since 2000.
And this would apply to the Cowboys because they were one of the worst in the league last year at generating a pass rush. I think on 23% of the snaps, basically 4th worst in the NFL. And you've had Jerry Jones say, we got to get a war daddy pass rusher.
Yeah, the people talking about they should get a pass rusher, a corner. I think they have to go pass rusher. And the reason I think they have to go pass rusher, if you don't take a pass rusher at 28, you're not going to get one at 60. The last time the pass rush was this deep on a draft board was 2011, and there were 11 pass rushers gone before 28. And by 60, there were 18 gone. So if the Cowboys don't take a pass rusher at 28, Lord knows what they're going to get. They're going to get probably another tight end in the second round at 60.
So who, as you look at the number of players who are pass rushers who could fall as far as 28, who do you see them choosing from? What's the group in that?
Well, it depends
position?
who's there. Taco Charlton, Charles Harris, Tack McKinley, Carl Lawson, T.J. Watt. If you want to tackle, Malik McDowell is the best tackle on the board who could be there at 28. That may be your best option if you don't like what you're looking at pass rusher. But they've got to get somebody in the front 4 that actually put pressure on the quarterback, or this team's got problems. So this team is another one and done next year.
One of those players you mentioned, with the famous last name, Watt, and everybody knows JJ, of course, and his brother. There's a shot that he could still be available. Now, if I remember this correctly, Goose, and I don't have a laptop full of color-coded things in front of me, but that was the Tyron Smith year where the Cowboys were picking 9th, and they ended up taking Tyron Smith, and J.J. Watt went.
And Wade Phillips wanted Watt.
At 11.
He went 11. So, there have been times when we would go, well, Watt, he's one of the greatest defensive players the last few years. He's obviously hurt now, was out pretty much all of last season. So, in a sense, you could say the Cowboys, both those teams got incredible players. Right now, the Cowboys are looking better because they have one of the preeminent left tackles. This Watt.
And he's still incredibly young, right? He came into the league as a 20-year-old.
You're right. Out of USC, of course. This Watt. Talk to us about him a little bit. I'm sort of curious as how versatile he could be, and knowing what the Cowboys and what Marinelli likes to do, is he a fit?
Well, people are going to love him because of his name.
Sure.
This is not J.J. Watt. This is T.J. Watt. This is the guy who's not going to go with the 11th
one letter
pick.
away from
right.
being J.J. Watt.
He's going to be at the back end of it. He may be a second rounder, but it depends on what's gone. If there are 8 pass rushers there and Watt's on the board, do the Cowboys say, okay, we're going to take the best guy? And he could be a consideration at that point, depending on who's gone. That's the great puzzle. This game is all about quarterbacks and pass rushers, and those all get pushed up the board. And if this is a good pass rush board, if Solomon Thomas goes in the top 5, that starts to run on pass rushers. The board could be fairly empty by the time the Cowboys go on the clock at 28, and then you're looking at the T.J. Watts and the Tyus Bowsers from Houston and people like that, guys that aren't first rounders. But if you don't get them now, you're not going to get them in a second.
Now, who is the highest character risk available, do you think, at that point? Who do you think will? I mean, if you had to look among this, the tack guy you mentioned,
Well,
McKinley's
an
he's a
injury
good dude.
question,
No,
right?
he's concussion. No. I want to say kind things about him. I think he's a good
He
leader.
could start the season on PUP.
The guy from Mizzou,
Start
Charles,
the regular season on PUP?
Yeah.
The regular season. So we're
got-
talking about a guy that the Cowboys will not have week 1 on the field.
Conceivably.
So they will take him. I would put all.
Are the Cowboys in a position where they can afford to do something like
No,
that?
I couldn't believe they took Jalen Smith last year. I look at their second round picks over the years and I just can't. It boggles my mind. Second round picks in ideal circumstance should be walk-in starters. That's a quality round. That's always been my favorite round of the draft because in the first round, teams are trying to draft the players that fit all the measurables. The right height, weight, speed, size, character, everything. They want the perfect fit. In the second round, they stop looking for measurables and they start drafting football players. They'll take a guy that's a step slow or an inch or two short, and they get good players. Mike Singletary is a 5'10 linebacker, second round. Jack Lambert, 212-pound middle linebacker, second round. Bobby Wagner, Darren Woodson. There's a lot of good players, great players in the second round that don't go in the first because of a characteristic or a trait that's missing. But these are good football players.
These are guys that you look at the tape and you look at
You
their
look at the tape.
productivity.
These are tape guys.
Yeah.
These are tape guys. And this is why this team isn't contender for Super Bowls. You look at what the Patriots do to start getting guys like Rob Gronkowski. They're getting good quality starters in the second round. Cowboys.
But he was an injury risk himself. He had back surgery, and that's proven to be something that's imperils his career going forward. Although he's been a highly productive player.
In the meantime, he's put a couple rings in your hand.
Not on mine, but Tom Brady might be thankful.
But you look at the Cowboys' last 11 drafts. They've had one impact player in the second round, Sean Lee. I mean, they've taken guys. They've always swung for the fences, trying to hit the home run. When a double will do.
And that was a risk. Sean Lee was a risk.
Bruce Carter, Sean Lee, injury risk.
Bruce Carter was an injury one. Even when the third round, DeMarco Murray, it took him a while to get going. Now that one ended up being really good, but second round, the two best they've had, the two most productive players in the NFL that have come in the second round, Sean Lee and Martellus Bennett. And what did they ever get out of Marty B?
They drafted 3 tight ends in the second round with Jason Witten there. You're drafting a backup player with Jason Witten on the field. And all 3 of these guys have left, and I would expect Escobar to have a good career in Kansas City. He was never used here. Why take players in the second round if you have no intention of using them? They've got to start drafting better in the second round if they want to compete for Super Bowls.
I found, and this is much to my amazement, but even last year when the Cowboys were doing what they were with 2 rookies, one at quarterback and one at running back, winning the division, establishing themselves the first seed in the NFC, the team to beat, which they were beaten by Green Bay again. But people were still enthralled with Jalen Smith. Like, I probably got asked more questions about Jalen Smith during the course of last year than I did any other player. So this seems like a good opportunity to talk about kind of where he is based on what we're hearing. And the people I've talked, I mean, we heard Stephen Jones say he's never been more excited. He's as enthusiastic now as ever when they took Jalen Smith. What I'm hearing is he does have some regeneration of the nerve, but he still has some drop foot. He still cannot run without an AFO brace on. What kind of challenge do you think that is for him to be an elite player if he never gets back to being able to have full control of his foot?
Well, I'm not sure as long as he's got the brace on if he'll be an elite player. And that's the problem. This was a huge gamble on the part of the Cowboys. They swung for the fences. They were taking a guy who probably could have been a top 5 or 6 pick, hoping that one day that the nerve would regenerate and he'd be healthy and able to be a contributor. We don't know. Stephen Jones is not a doctor. We're not doctors.
But the doctor who did the surgery is their doctor, and that's Dr. Dan Cooper. who I think believes that Jalen Smith will have a 10-year career. It's a matter of when it actually starts. From what you understand, he's going to be a full participant, unlimited, based upon the trainers, to be on the field in the off-season program, but you still think it's a big guess as to what his contribution level will be.
We'll see how much of a participant he is. I'm sure he'll start as a participant. We'll see. Again, until he gets on the field, the Cowboys won't know. We won't know. Dr. Cooper won't know.
Yeah, and I am very, it's very dubious, this best drop foot available strategy they've had. I don't think that's anything.
Well, he is a high character guy. I mean,
really
you talk to anybody out there, and they'll say,
he's unreal. He was the safest pick in a million years if he were healthy.
Well, I was told he would be a top 5 pick in any draft in the last 20 years had he not gotten hurt.
He got hurt.
He did.
Which put him there in the second round for the Cowboys.
Oh my gosh!
But they could have used a player that could have an impact last year. Maybe they were one player away last year.
They only had to get to Aaron Rodgers one more time.
One more time.
And that would have done it for sure. Now, people want to hear from Goose on, and he used to do this. I used to watch him do this. You've been at combines with Goose. He would interview like every kid in the whole deal. They'd invite like 340 guys, and he's up there, and I would be like, okay, how's Goose going to do this? I'd kind of watch him because, I'd interview about 3 of them, and he'd be up there, here comes Malcolm somebody. Who, you remember that year, Malcolm Kelly?
Smith, Super Bowl MVP.
No, not him. The guy, the wide receiver. Remember the Redskins were looking, I'll tell you what they were doing that year. The Redskins were flying around looking at wide receivers, okay? They ended up taking 2, I believe, in the second round. They took Malcolm Kelly and Devin Thomas out of your alma mater, Michigan State, and the one guy they went to see, they flew out there to see him, Jordy Nelson. They didn't pick him. But now you probably, when you go to the combine now, approach it a little bit differently because you're being asked to do different things for the Dallas Morning News. Let me throw a couple names at you. Now, my alter ego, Dr. Draft, loves the name you mentioned, Charles Harris. I mean, I think if he's there, that is a really, really good fit. Now, at some point, we'll have to answer the question, why, if Missouri keeps putting out great pass rushers, why are they horrible? Why is Missouri not any good? I'd like to get to the bottom of that at some point.
We'll have to get Mickey Spagnola in here to answer that.
That's right, Brad Sham. Okay, Tre'Davious White, Kevin King. A lot of folks, I know you said pass rusher.
They're going to have to go in the second round to get a corner.
Yeah, I think you cannot get the same quality pass rusher at 60 that you can at corner. Yeah. You got Anthony Brown, in the 5th last year? You can get a cornerback in a second and third round. You cannot get an impact pass rusher at 60. As a matter of fact, the year of 2011, after those 18 pass rushers had cleared the board, the next defensive front guy taken was Terrell McClain, who this team just left walk out the door. So that's the type of player you're talking about if you don't take one in the first round.
He was their best guy.
Yeah, and he was their best guy. I'm still puzzled. You let 2 starting corners, a safety, your best inside pass rusher, and yet you give money to Terrence Williams, a receiver who you can find in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round of virtually any draft.
Do they rely too much on Rod Marinelli to coach good players?
That and the fact that when your head coach is an offensive guy, you take care of the offense. Last year, if Bill Cowher, Bill Belichick, Tony Dungy was head coach of this team, I think there's a good chance they would have taken Bosa or Ramsey. But because you got an offensive guy, you take Elliott.
Were any of those guys you mentioned interested in the job? Because it almost came available at that time.
Not this
coming off 4-12.
No, those guys that find those TV gigs, they kind of like life in those TV seats.
We'll see what Tony thinks about that.
Should we get Goose to just talk about his synopsis on a couple of these potential pass rushers who could find their way down?
Yes, and you continue, by the way, to try to prevent me from, because I think they're going to end up taking one of these cornerbacks. But let's hear his. No. Let's break down. I want to hear a couple of, because Charlton's
you better
one of
find a cornerback at 28 that can cover for 6 seconds.
That's a long time.
Because that's what Aaron Rodgers is going to have. So you better find a guy who can cover for 6 seconds.
That's before he leaves the pocket and resets and tries it again. Derek Barnett. Probably no way he falls anywhere near them, but your thoughts?
Again, these guys are good pass rushers, but by and large, down here, you're going to get guys that are basically designated pass rushers. You're not going to put them out there on the rundowns. So these are going to be limited contributor types, but if they can get to the quarterback, You can do that in second and third downs, but you're not going to get a 3-down lineman. And all those guys, the Charles Harrises and people you mentioned, the G.J. Watts, they're not going to be there on rundowns. So you need somebody else to play the end position as well.
The big-time guy that could do all that's going to go Solomon or
right. Yeah, those guys are going very high.
Yes,
I mean, you're talking about getting the 7th, 8th, 9th pass rusher in this draft. You're not getting a perfect specimen. These guys are not, or they'd be going in the top 10.
What about McKinley? We talked about him a little bit
I like
earlier.
him, but again, the injury concern, he's had some concussions. Great work ethic, plays hard every play. That wouldn't be a bad pick if he's sitting there, but there's no guarantee he's going to be there.
There's a couple of interesting, unique guys in this draft, too. Christian McCaffrey. Where do you think he could go, and what kind of team does he have to go to be effective?
I think I would expect him to go somewhere between 14 and 24.
So you don't think Sean Payton's going to take him? That's a tip for me. Okay, he's at 11.
I think
he's added Darren Sproles.
That may be a little rich for McCaffrey, but he does everything. I mean, he's a great. He's like a Darren Sproles. He can do it all and be a great piece to your offense. But I think a team that has a lot in place would take him. If you need, again, I think this is going to be.
The Saints are like the Cowboys, right? Great on offense, no defense.
Right. You got to find defense.
What about Jabril Peppers? What do you see
Some
his
people
position
love him.
being?
Some people hate him. I'd keep him at safety. Dynamic playmaker in college, return guy. Again, I think he's going to get drafted higher than people think. Some people think he's going to be the second round. I don't think he's going to be there. I think he's going to go in the 20s. But you're buying the playmaking ability.
All right, those are some of the pass rushers, and I always want to say that you can email us, and we'll respond once we get the password to this. The Doomsday Podcast.
Plus, we're not locked out of our own email account.
This is the Doomsday Podcast at gmail.com. Did you see me last night on Ducey's show, Ed? Talking
I
about
did
this.
see you on there, yeah.
I think Goose saw that. Some. Really, Ducey, talk about a supporter. Dale would never have us on, but Ducey.
Dale who?
That's right.
Isn't
Dale
Trahan?
doesn't know who you guys are.
Isn't Trahan the guy? I remember, when I was going to go, so I was at the Dallas Morning News, and I was on a flight to, I think, one of the NFC Championship games to San Francisco, and I'd gotten upgraded, I think, and I sat next to Dale, who I'm sure bought his ticket in first class on American Airlines, who could be a potential sponsor for the show eventually. But anyway, so I had this offer to leave the morning news and go to TV at CNNSI, right? Which was a startup operation. And so I was asking Dale his advice on that. And he cautioned me by saying, the thing I always ask myself is, would I watch it? And my answer in this case is no. So he thought I made a huge mistake leaving the newspaper and going to television. And he's been proven right, I think.
Yes,
There's no question. That was good advice, not followed.
Most of America wishes you had followed Dale's advice. No, you've done just fine. Now, if y'all don't mind, I'd like to ask, and Goose, my gosh, he's going to charge us a lot more money if we keep him too long, but these cornerbacks, and Goose, I hear what you're saying. They need the pass rusher. I'm with you. But Rod can coach them up. Rod will take one of these youngsters, coach them up. So I'm going to say Kevin King, okay, out of Washington, big, tall, angular. He's got that size. He's gonna kind of rough them up a little bit. What do you think about Kevin King?
If they don't take a pass rusher, I think they take him. I think he'll be the best player on the board for him. And hope like hell that Rod can coach him up.
Well, that position has to be a concern because they've lost both their starters, right? They lost Mo Claiborne
Steven says it didn't matter; they were bad players.
And Brandon Carr. That is what they say. They say, all the doomsayers were saying in 2015 that these guys were horrible and we should get rid of them. And now that we have, they were supposedly terrific players.
Last 3 years, I maintain you could have won with those three corners if you had a pass rush.
Right. And
they didn't have a pass rush. They want to blame the cornerbacks.
And not only that, but if you look at the improvement the teams in the NFC East have made, it's been at the receiver position, right?
Yeah, and that's
it's Terrell Pryor in Washington. It's Alshon Jeffrey. It's the big receiver, too. It's Brandon Marshall with the Giants. I mean, they've got to have a certain type of corner to succeed in this division.
King would be a good fit if you could rush the passer. I'd love to have King back there lining up against Jeffrey and Marshall and somebody who can line up with a big physical receiver. You better have a big physical corner. But you still got to rush the passer.
Okay, we before we let you go,
what about Charles Tapper? He can't do that?
We don't know. There's a lot of question marks in this pass rush.
Tapper.
Charles Tapper.
I forgot he's around.
He's another guy like Jalen Smith who didn't play last year because of an injury.
Yeah, good project guy.
Now's the
third
time,
round.
right? Bring all those guys out.
Projects in the third round.
Wheel them out. Let's go.
I love a good project player. Now, the Cowboys found their quarterback. They got Dak, and they'll have to see is Kellen Moore, is he going to be the backup, whatever.
Can I tell you a funny story about this, by the way?
No, please, yeah.
So
we'll
last year I
edit
did
it out
cover,
later.
as you mentioned earlier, I did cover the Cowboys draft last year, and I was out at Valley Ranch, right? That was the last draft at Valley Ranch.
Yes.
And I covered Ezekiel Elliott, and I covered the Jalen Smith, but we didn't cover the third day. So I was sitting at home when they made the most important decision of all and took Dak Prescott.
Only because they couldn't trade up to get Connor Cook.
What does Garth Brooks call it? Thank God for unanswered prayers.
Exactly.
Would you sing a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, but I will say this: I did it. I emceed an event. I emceed an event with Dak Prescott last year, and I told the crowd, and with Dak sitting right next to me, I said, this wasn't supposed to be. I mean, the Cowboys tried to trade up and get Paxton Lynch, and they tried to trade up and get Connor Cook. So imagine how good those guys are if Dak is doing this. Dak really didn't see the humor in that, I don't think.
Oh, great. We had a potential guest for the future.
I've already alienated the quarterback.
Yeah. Oh, you and I are both pretty good at alienating quarterbacks.
Well, you're better at it than I am.
I'm on that same list. I'm on Mr. Hall of Fame voter here. I'm on the same list.
Yeah, I don't know when Tony's going to come on here.
Oh, is that who you were talking about, Tony?
It might take him a while.
Well,
hey, by the way, do you think Tony's going to... Goose, I mean, you saw how Aikman, it worked out well for him. Do you see him sliding in there, that number one? I mean, first of all, it's a lot to ask of someone. You've been around Tony. Do you think he can make that transition, or are you like a lot of us that shocked that CBS would go that route? I mean, this is a tall task for him to do.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I think he could probably make the transition, but not instantly. I think it's going to be a rough go, especially when the New York TV critics get all in, who kind of
Tony's always handled criticism very well,
yes.
from my experience.
Yeah, this ought to be good to see him criticize players.
That's
for a guy who couldn't.
To me, that's exactly the biggest challenge for Tony Romo.
Yes. That's
the ability, because these players are trained from, like, the first time they put on their shoulder pads and buckle the chin strap is you don't criticize other players, or especially teammates. And now I think Troy Aikman has done this remarkably well. He does it in a very fair way, but he does it, and that is necessary to have credibility with your audience, the viewers. And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge for Tony, because I've never heard Tony Romo criticize anybody at Valley Ranch other than the media. But players,
other than Mosley,
coaches, he's never. Tell me a time he's second guessed publicly a decision any of the coaching staff ever made, or any move Jerry Jones ever made. Troy Aikman did that all the time.
This is going to be a lot tougher than I think he realizes.
Yeah, I think you are both right. I don't think he'll have that hard of a time criticizing Jason Garrett right now. I think he's going to be up to the task on that. Okay, speaking of the quarterback position, last thing we'll get to with you, Mahomes, Trubisky. I mean, my goodness, there's Trubisky out of North Carolina. He plays 1 year, and this guy may go in the top, who knows, 5 or 10 in this draft. This is, to me. And we, last year we looked at some of these guys, and you've seen what Goff's done. It hasn't been great so far. Wentz looks a lot better, but these guys seem way more unpredictable than even those last year. And those guys weren't as good as Mariota, at least according to you guys, the draft experts. Some of the guys from the Jameis and Mariota from the previous year.
Because quarterbacks always get overdrafted. If you don't have one, you can never stop looking for one. And the draft is all about hope, giving your fan base hope. If you draft a Trubisky, we now have our franchise quarterback. And your fans are going to...
Shouldn't Cleveland know better than any team that just doesn't work? Like, if your grade doesn't justify it, then you shouldn't take him, because you haven't really solved your problem.
He's from Ohio. His favorite team's the Browns. It worked once with Bernie Kosar.
How many years ago was that?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. But Bernie took him to back-to-back
I don't
AFC
think there were
title games.
podcasts back then, if I'm thinking correctly.
No, these guys aren't top 15 picks. But a couple of them are going to go in the top 15, because if you don't have a quarterback, you have to find one. Personally, I like Watson because of the tangibles. He plays well on the biggest stages in college football. And against an Alabama defense that had 11 NFL players, I mean, he owned that defense. He's the guy I like, but Trubisky's probably going to go higher. And it kills me that he played 1 year. If you look at the history,
and the North Carolina coaches were in no hurry to play him. Like there was an opportunity to play him earlier if he was good enough.
Well, the other quarterback, Marquise Williams, set the school record for career touchdowns produced and all that. He was a pretty good player. But yeah, he's on the field 1 year. I like the quarterbacks that are 4-year starters that throw between 1,300 and 1,600 passes. The Peyton Mannings, the Carson Palmers, the Phillip Rivers. Those are the guys that have the best chance of success. They have seen everything the college game throw at them. A Trubisky, who's played 1 year in the ACC, is not seeing what he's going to see at this level on Sunday afternoons, and I think it's going to be a tough go for him.
What about Patrick Mahomes? There have been comparisons his playing style to Brett Favre.
But you look at the history of the Texas Tech quarterbacks. It's not been a good one. Again, I think my guess he'll probably go in the upper part of the second round like Andy Dalton did, but you don't know what you're getting.
Well, we knew what we were getting, and it was one of the great experts on the draft of all time, one of our favorite columnists, and I want to let people know, Talk of Fame Network, you can hear him, and that's on Apple. That's available on Apple. And Goose, how often is that out there for folks?
We tape the show once a week.
Okay.
And you can get it on iTunes every week. We had just finished up a draft series, and we featured Florida State this week. We had Jameis Winston and Derek Brooks on talking about Florida State, their days there.
Couldn't get Dion?
No. Won't get Romo, won't
try.
get Dion.
That's right. Oh, who's your pick at 28? People will want to know because for years we waited for the final mock draft. You've retired from mock drafting.
I used to love that, by the way, because Rick he'd do several mock drafts, but only the last one really
only
mattered,
one counted.
right?
Yeah, only one counted.
What was your strategy in doing multiple?
Well, I did
drafts?
3 of them. The Morning News wanted me to start in the fall, but I said I'll do 2 Sundays before. In my first mock, I always did my best player on the board in order to have them stacked. The second was team need. Third one was all the good stuff. All the stuff that I knew went into that one. There was a lot of surprises.
Do you still do this at home just on your off time?
Nah, not at all.
So this is just a totally in the wind pick here at 28?
In the wind. Yeah,
got?
I would say Harris. That seems
nice.
logical. That seems logical. I think he may be a guy there because I think he's not going to be a 3-down end, but he's a guy who can rush the passer. If not Harris, I think King might be the guy.
Golly, I like that. That's very
Charles
Ely
Harris type of rusher.
What's that?
Coney Ely type of rusher.
I think he's got more skills than Ely as a pass rusher. Ely can also play
Missouri
the run.
defensive ends. Shane Ray.
Alden Smith.
Shane Ray. Yeah, why didn't they win more there?
Michael Sam.
It's because they had Steve Pizarkowitz, a quarterback.
I don't know what that means.
Ed does.
Chase Daniel.
Chase wasn't bad.
Yeah. South Lake Zone.
Ed, say goodbye to Goose.
Why? Goose. I think I told you this earlier because you refer to me as an award-winning journalist, and I only won half an award. Rick and I won this Katie Award, right, for the Jimmy Jerry breakup, our coverage of that in 1994 at the NFL owners meetings. And what a time that was. Why we haven't written a book about that, I have no idea, but I'm a little busy with this podcast now. But if you'd like to do that some point.
It's just the only meaningful story in the city of Dallas in the last quarter of a century, that's all.
In sports?
In anything.
Period. That's
wow.
right.
It's quite a statement.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. He's done too much of this.
Yeah, Ed's got half of Katie. I got the other half. We got to get together and put them together.
Yeah. Guys, I've got
my half is kind of obscene, I think, by today's standards. I think if people saw this, there might be lawsuits.
I've got a full Katie at home, by the way. I didn't have to share it with anybody.
What it cost
but
you?
I think they found out. No, there was a scandal.
Oh, okay.
There was a
Baylor?
Katie's. No. It's
What do you
not.
mean, no?
No.
Like there hasn't been a scandal at Baylor?
Yeah,
What?
there's been a lot of those. I don't want to get into this whole story, but my Katie, I get it. I still have it, but they literally put a recall on them. And they said whoever was like doing it that year was like caught up in some kind of scandal, like they didn't do the voting properly. And it's like, yeah, they got in trouble.
So it was like the Academy
Press
Awards.
Club of Dallas,
It's like
or whatever
the Academy
we call
Awards
it.
only later?
Yes, and I never gave it back. I'm like, I don't care if there was a scandal with Katie. It has nothing to do with my award. I won this thing fair and square.
His Katie's wearing a blindfold.
Whoever. All right. Thank you. Rick Goose Gosselin,
My
great
pleasure,
to
guys.
have you. Okay.
Best of luck going forward.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. We appreciate it. And we are so pleased here on the Doomsday Podcast, Ed Werder alongside Matt Mosley, to have one of our favorite people, great friend of ours, Chris Mortensen, who, has been battling illness, throat cancer for, going on a couple of years here, and is going to be returning. We've seen him briefly.
He was at the Super Bowl.
He was at Super Bowl, but we saw him with the whole, saying goodbye to Berman. That was awesome to see him come out there. That was fun. It looked great. But man, he's back right in the middle of this draft coverage, and he was kind enough to stop by the Doomsday Podcast. Mort, this is the first one ever. It could be the last.
It's a historic moment.
Yes.
Well, we're about to end that then. Okay.
But we so appreciate you doing this. Are you? Is it almost like the nervousness that you felt all those many years ago when guys like you and Werder, great sports writers, made the transition to TV? What is this? What is this like? Are you going to have? Are you going to have the jitters, or do you always have the jitters when you get ready to do a draft or go on TV?
I don't always have the jitters. I actually probably have a little bit higher level of anxiety than normal, and I'm not a guy who has high anxiety. I don't worry a lot. Ed could probably tell you that, but this would be technically my first event ever, first appearance ever for ESPN was the NFL Draft in 1991. So this will be 27. But I missed last year for obvious reasons, even though I participated on the phone. Like when Laramie Tunsil and the gas mask went up on the social media, I immediately was interacting with our people in Chicago where the draft was being held, and we went through a process of really trying to, show proper restraint, discerning, verifying. But I wasn't on TV, so I'm back on TV. And even though I've had limited exposure, you go through and your life is for 15 months has been about survival and trying to overcome and make some progress. I'm still in the fight, but I do find myself being a little bit more nervous. And I'm not going to do the full, it's not going to be the entire, I think, contribution I've made in the past, but and the draft is different, by the way. It moves so much faster, which is better for the viewers because they shorten up the clock. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited, and at the same time, I have a little bit more nerves than I normally do.
Why is that?
I think there's a sense of confidence. I think it's like anything else. When you do repetition, even in our business, the more you do it, it becomes more natural. And I just haven't done it very much. And the other thing is that in the draft, when it moves so fast, it's that whole thing is trying to regurgitate something in 15 or 20 seconds, if you even get that. Because I have prepared for this draft, but like I do know, in the draft, you probably use 3% of what you've gathered. And I also have a lot of great stories, nuggets, that I would never tell on air anyway, because they're just not appropriate.
Would I be able to have access to the 97% of the information you're not going to use? Because that would probably be the best stuff I've ever had in my career.
Well, it's interesting stuff. Like I say, some of it's not for public knowledge, though.
Tell people, and we don't want to spend too much time on this, but tell people kind of where you are in your fight to overcome stage 4 throat cancer. I know you don't want to go through everything you've been through. It's been an enormous battle, and you've done it with faith and determination, and obviously you've had great medical care at MD Anderson and other facilities around the country. But just tell people where you are now physically in this fight.
Yeah, we go back to early January 2016 when I was diagnosed, and 2016 was a very intense, health challenge, as intense as it can be in the head. You're, more than too familiar with these battles. I guess, I can tell you that, they're like most cancer journeys, you have lows and then you have some hope. You kind of live day to day, and and then there are setbacks, and I haven't announced, but I've talked openly about the setback I had was that I had a metastasis to my left lung. So I'm currently in treatment doing immunotherapy, and I'm having a good response. Those tumors are shrinking, but everything else is clean. My cancer is clean everywhere else. I weighed in recently at 166 pounds, which I got down to 142. Now, you got to realize I started off at almost 200. I needed to lose a little bit of weight. That's the way to do it. If anybody's listening out there and wants to lose weight, don't try this method. And my energy is pretty good, and my spirits, I think, have always remained high. I may have had, I think, maybe 2 or 3 low moments, where you wonder if you're going to live, but to be quite honest with you, I think your loved ones kind of carry that burden and you kind of want to take it off of their shoulders too, because they're the ones who feel the burden. I think even more so than myself.
To what extent were you sure that this is something you wanted to continue doing if you could regain your health?
Well, I've never thought. I've always said, there's no retirement is not in the Bible at all, which is my go-to book. So, but it's something that when you enjoy doing it and it's habitual, it's part of your life. I mean, even when I was sick, I always felt like I'd plug in somehow, some way to what I do, and then it's just a matter of, if somebody still wants to listen to you. And I'm not sure that's the case. You two guys, obviously.
We're paying handsomely for the opportunity, as you'll see in your PayPal account. No, and I wanted to say one thing, Matt, if I could. You did the introduction, but there's nobody in my career who has meant more to me than Mort. Mort and Peter King are the ones who are responsible for any success that I've had, and Mort's the one. Peter King gave me my first TV opportunity, but Mort was really the one who advocated for me with ESPN and created that opportunity that I had there, and it goes really beyond just getting me in. I mean, I've learned more journalism from him than I did in 4 years of college. Mort's a guy who's such an enormously respected journalist at our company that it's not the same when he's not there, and he uses his influence to the benefit of not himself but of everyone else. And it's important to have somebody who has the kind of journalistic conscience that Chris Mortensen does in your department to make sure that we're doing it right and we have the right level of integrity and accurate reporting. And that's what he was referring to when he talked about doing the Larry Tunsil story last year. He contributed. I mean, he was one of the reasons we got it right and did it the right way, even if we may not have had the first video. But so I'll forever be appreciative of all Mort's meant to me in that regard, and he's a great, great friend. He was to us when we were going through the cancer battle with our daughter, Christy, who's still trying to overcome some of that, and Trey. There's been no bigger supporter of me and my family in my life than Chris Mortensen.
All right, let's get on with the
Nice segue, Mort. Great segue. Way to go. You haven't learned a damn thing, have you, about television?
No.
All right, let me ask. So, how many hours do you think you've put into your draft prep this year as you go to Philly?
Listen, it's quite a few hundred hours. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But you got to if you know me, I mean, it's like I am a big college football guy, in part because, I always have been. And then when you have a son who actually becomes a football player and plays college football, as my son Alex did, and then ends up coaching, like a place like Alabama, which he does now. So I follow college football voraciously. I always have.
Right.
And the other thing is that since I wasn't really working last fall, I mean, I spent my time, actually, it's almost too much football. I sat back and said, boy, and Saturdays are like, you go from morning till midnight, and then you wake up on Sunday and the Monday, and it's Thursday football. And like an idiot, I watch high school football on the webcast on Fridays. So you go in, and people always wonder why the draft is such an attraction, and it's just true. It's college football, which is maybe the second most popular sport in America, or it's in there. It's in the running. And you got the NFL, which is, I guess the most popular, and it's intersection, it's graduation day. You're giving out grades for this class, and you become familiar with these players, and then there's always unique stories about a lot of these players, and then try to match it up with what the team is thinking about. At the same time, I understand the whole concept that teams have to protect their information. So I think it's really good to focus on how teams feel about players. And generally, when you get an idea of how they feel about certain players, you can usually connect the dots.
We're talking to ESPN's Chris Mortensen, who'll be an enormous part of ESPN's draft coverage. And, boy, I tell you, so happy to have him back. And, boy, that preparation he was talking about, Ed, it sounded like what we've done for this podcast. Hundreds of hours. It really sounds similar. Now, I think what Ed said, Mort, is very sincere. And, I've had some great moments with you. And you're right. A lot of these reporters, I see them, I don't mention any names, but they got their cell phones, and they just don't really have time for anybody because they're tweeting constantly. And no matter what you were breaking, you would always have time at the owners' meeting. Let's go over here and sit down and have a lunch, and I appreciate that. Now, I will say this. Ed laid it on pretty thick there. Perhaps that ESPN Insiders show, he's really gotten some great time on that show. I think he's a little worried about them giving up, his seat and you coming back in there. So I hope there's a place for both of you guys on that.
Well, there has been in the past, and
yeah,
that was always a great thing. There's nothing better than being on the show with Mort. I mean, you talk about being apprehensive about being on live TV, and yeah, there is always some of that because you don't know what's going to happen. But you always know when you have Chris Mortensen sitting on your left or your right that there's nothing that's going to happen in the NFL that's going to surprise us to the point that we're not going to be prepared to have an intelligent response and conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. You don't feel the same with Phil Yates?
I'm not strong enough to bench Phil Yates right now, but I may give it a go next.
Ooh, that's a great programming thought. I wonder if Field's. I think I would pay to fly Field who's been bench pressed many times by Damian Woody and Myles Garrett and some other prospects in the draft. That's become a new thing. I think that would be really interesting to have you try and bench press Field Yates at some point.
That's right. And I will say this, despite all the preparation and how seriously we take our journalism, having fun is absolutely important. And that's the other thing about the job you talked about. You still want to do this. Yeah, if you have fun doing something, you do it. And I have fun doing it. And the other thing is I have fun being around people. Relationships and friendships are wonderful things to cultivate and grow. And so that's all part of it. And like I said, then you guys, I'm sure, feel the same way. First job I ever had at the Daily Breeze in Torrance, California, my hometown newspaper. And when I was full-time, I made $90 a week, and I couldn't believe I got paid $90 a week to do that. And I worked as many hours then as I do now, if not more so then, and loved it.
And you're making at least double that now, right?
Yeah, I think it's 3 times that, $90 a week.
Nice.
That's right.
You won't find that from this show.
That's right. Is there anybody, Mort, who just kind of, I'm sure you got a lot of well wishes, a lot of text messages, but during that time when you say you would hit a couple of those low moments, boy, you've known Parcells, you've known Jerry, you've known a lot of folks over the years. Is there any call that sort of stands out along the journey, the battle that you've been in that really jumps out at you?
I would tell you too many of them, and I've been asked that question numerous times, and it's like anything else, feel like you're going to leave somebody else out. I mean, there's been owners, but what it did, and it's kind of amazing, is it also reconnected me to a lot of people from my past. Like a lot of people, old high school friends. Former teammates and classmates, and to people out in California. I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in the Los Angeles area, and so hearing from them was just as I think thrilling to hear from. Say whether it's Jerry Jones has always been great, but like Park Hunt, the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, he actually wrote me, I think, the most moving letter to me, because his dad, Lamar Hunt, his life was taken by cancer, and I had a really good close relationship with Lamar and Clark's mother Norma. It was wonderful. I mean, and that letter meant a lot. But there's been many from all walks of life. That's the great thing. It's not just in the sporting world, and so it's been that's. I made the speech. I got this award, Lombardi Cancer Award, at Georgetown University, and I figured this out. They give you an award for getting cancer. That was it. Because that's what I was asking. Why am I getting this award? You got cancer. Okay, we need to raise money. We'll do it. Anyways, it's. I think you experience a different kind of humanity. And everybody knows. I think knows I was at MD Anderson in Houston much during the time, and I've always said that I have like great confidence and renewed faith in America at a time when a lot of people don't have faith in America. Just experiencing the humanity and empathy, compassion, the brilliance of young people of all cultures down there at MD Anderson on staff there, and so this experience, other than the fact that it tried to kill me and still trying to kill me, has been humbling and heartwarming and almost worth it. And I say that with an asterisk. I think we go along in life and we live our lives and it's great and it's going and it's going and it's going and we never stop to realize just how blessed we are. And maybe we get so absorbed in our own lives we don't get a chance to experience. I think the beauty of life and the life that others lead and live. So it's been life reaffirming in a fight that you're actually battling for your life.
Yeah, if you think your life is bad, I'm not talking about you, Mort, but I'm talking about people in general. Who are living under normal circumstances, as bad as those might be, go visit an MD Anderson and you will feel remarkably better and more upbeat about your life and the state it is, whatever it is. No matter how bad you think it might be, you'll have a whole different opinion and a whole new level of respect for cancer patients if you go visit one of these facilities.
The cancer patients and the care team. So, and at the same time, going back to the NFL, people I've heard from. By the way, I bumped into people who are in the NFL down at MD Anderson whose confidence, I will not reveal. I mean, I'll hold their confidence that you may surprise people who are cancer patients or have been themselves. And so, in terms of people I've heard from, it's just from all walks of life, and even appreciate the people who just send you a message that they're thinking about you, they're praying for you. Those things are, like I say, hey, it's like this. If you ever wonder what's going to happen, maybe at your funeral or your memorial service, get cancer and go through what I went through. And people say really nice things about you. They don't say the bad stuff about you.
Two of the great moments. You asked him whose texts or whose phone calls or cards he received that really meant something to me as a friend of Mort's, and seeing him go through this. Two of the great moments for me as an observer were seeing Mort come out at the Hall of Fame when he won the McCann Award and be introduced to the crowd and embrace Jim Kelly, who's been through it himself. And the other moment was after a Cardinals game when on live TV, Larry Fitzgerald in a post-game interview thought enough to say, "Love you, Mort." I mean, those were great moments to me.
Yeah, well, those are the things that happened. And McCann Award led to Canton. That was something where I didn't think I was going to be able to make it. It wasn't a particularly good stretch I was going through. Still had my feeding tube in, I think. But bottom line is that, God gave me the strength, and my wife, Mickey, and I were able to get there. And that was a really special moment because there were a lot of Hall of Famers who came back to see me and just made you feel warm and kind of very appreciative of your own experiences that you've been through. So, anyways.
Talking to ESPN's Chris Mortensen here on the Doomsday Podcast, our first episode. And it's pretty
Doomsday,
big.
that's good for me, right? Yeah, I got a Doomsday. This is great, man. Mort's got cancer. We're on the Doomsday.
We changed it for you.
The Flex podcast.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how inappropriate it was, Mort.
Let me ask Mort. Obviously, spent a lot of time, as you said, looking into the draft and talking to a lot of people, as you always do. You've always. Before I came here and became largely responsible for the Cowboys, it was kind of your thing on TV to do the Cowboys, and I know you remain close to the organization and keep in touch with a lot of sources there. What is it about this draft that you're going to be watching from their point of view? What do you think they need to accomplish in this draft?
I think they've gotten their feet on the ground with the drafts. Maybe Stephen Jones, obviously, I think getting everybody grounded. But, listen, we all know they have, I think, I want to say one of the best kept secrets in the NFL, or a guy who doesn't get enough acclaim, which is Will McClay in the personnel department. And, guy who just is the, I don't know, it feels like back in the day when you had a lot of personnel guys and scouts who just grinded, and worked hard. And so I'm expecting, even though they're picking, what are they picking, 28?
28th, yeah.
I'm expecting them to just end up with good football players. I mean, and let's face it, everybody says take best player available, but people will fix their boards to kind of make it, if the grades are close, it's going to be best available player at your need. So we're expecting, the pass rusher and the secondary guys, and who knows who's going to be there. I mean, some people think Charles Harris of Missouri, the defensive end, will be there. I don't think he's going to be there by the time they pick, but sometimes the teams at the bottom of the draft, if they stay patient, good players that you didn't expect will fall to them.
Is there an offensive player you could see falling far enough that as much as they want to draft defense, they go that direction, much like they did last year with Ezekiel Elliott? I mean, that was an offensive pick, but it was designed to help protect their defense, and it was obviously a very effective selection.
No, listen, it's just that the offense, we know it's not a good offensive line draft. They don't need offensive line anyway, but, I mean, there's going to be a couple that are taken before they get there. The receivers are just, they're good, but, I mean, do you want John Ross? Because John Ross, I think, will fly, but he's I don't see, I think it's such a good defensive draft. I don't know why they wouldn't address that area. They're going to get good players there. They really are on the defensive side of the football, and so at the same time, they don't need a quarterback. Tight end, O.J. Howard's going. There are good tight ends in this draft. I have always wondered. I know Jason Witten signed an extension; he's coming back, but at some point, is there a special tight end that you got such a high grade on that you want to grab him so he will kind of grow up with Dak and have Jason mentor him? There are really good tight ends in this draft.
Mort, you had to have been amazed, as we all were, to see Dak Prescott, a guy who was, the ninth quarterback taken in the fourth round, become the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys, and for Tony, even when he was healthy, not to be able to get back into the starting lineup. From watching, like we all did, Dak, and then also the fact that you do watch a ton of college football, how surprised were you that he made such an incredible transition, and what do you think is next for him?
Well, I think that, and actually went through this last week talking to some people, I think he was undervalued last year. I thought he was undervalued last year. Now, I had a little bit of bias because I got to know Dak at the Manning Passing Academy, and you get to be impressed with the young man. But the other thing is that when you watched Mississippi State play, which I did frequently when Dak was there, first of all, he should have been a late first, second round grade. Ron Jaworski said it himself before the draft last year. So teams miss on him. And then I started thinking, well, did the DUI, did that get him knocked down? And that really wasn't what you heard from teams. Nobody really mentioned the DUI. But last week, somebody was trying to tell me, trying to get me to fall in love with Deshaun Watson and say, hey, he could be like Dak Prescott, and people missed on Dak. So I went and watched 2.5 hours of Deshaun Watson again, and I was in person to both the Alabama games for Clemson, and then I went and watched Dak, 2 hours of him, and I'm telling you, people miss on Dak. Dak threw the ball much better than Deshaun Watson throws it. Dak was as good or better an athlete as Deshaun Watson, and he played with far less talent, much less talent around, especially last year at Mississippi State. And I just think that was a total miss by a majority of teams, and it's the same thing you could say, well, the Patriots missed on Tom Brady, too. They got him at 199 year he came out, and the Cowboys missed on Dak. But they got him, and I think that happens in this draft, and that's why the draft's fun, because we know there's going to be some mistakes, and we're going to sit back and say, boy, I was wrong about that, or somebody else was wrong about that.
It's pretty clear, I think, that the Cowboys don't think what Dak Prescott did as a rookie was a fluke, or else Jerry would have brought Tony Romo back for another season, as he no doubt hoped he could be so convincing as to convince Romo to come back and play for another year. But do you think there's any doubt that Dak will continue to evolve and develop as an NFL quarterback?
No, I have no doubt. I have zero doubt. The guy's driven. First of all, he's gifted. I mean, he is gifted. He's a gifted physical talent. And the thing I hate the most is the saying that any prospect, a quarterback, especially, he's a winner. Well, you know what? If I gave you the list of quarterbacks who were winners in college and tell you what they did in the NFL, the list is ridiculous. But he has physical gifts and he has intangibles that are off the chart. You tie the intangibles once you determine the guy has the physical skill talent. I think Dak's going to continue to grow. People like to say, we're going to hear this, is you're going to have a sophomore slump. Guys, I'm telling you, as an old baseball writer, sophomore slump was never a football term. It was a baseball term. But now we've dragged it over to the football side, and I don't know why, because I don't know that I realize the teams will have more tape on Dak and everything, but it's still the ultimate team game, and you have to have the quarterback to make it work. The Cowboys have that. They have a team around it. Now, hopefully they can get the defense good enough, so that's the quarterback's best friend as well. But I think Dak will continue to ascend, not descend.
You also have some insight into his work ethic. You've talked to some of the people that have helped prepare him for the draft, and some of those people he's continued to work with this offseason. What do they say about that element of his game?
Same thing. I mean, that it's off the charts, and he can't get enough. He has a desire to be great, and he too is one of those guys that has a chip on his shoulder. Everybody gets motivated by different things, but he's going to be in the weight room with what Mike Boyce said, and he is now. And that's leadership. When other guys can say when the quarterback's the hardest working guy on the team, they see it. Now he's got to perform on the field for them to get the total respect, but that interaction that he has with teammates, he's won them over, and he does it because he is the hardest worker. I can remember when there have been quarterbacks come out, and I've asked a college coach. You can guess who this is, but I'm not going to expose it. But he was the number one pick in the draft, and I asked his college coach, who I have a really good relationship with. I said, "Is he going to do the work?" And he says, "He won't be the hardest worker, but you can get him to do the work." Well, as soon as he said that, I knew there's no way. There's just no way. And of course, the guy was a bust. That's not a problem with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be that in any way. We appreciate that Jamarcus story. By the way, can I say this, Mort? I mean, you're away for a little bit, but you're still plugged in and watching all this. Is it a little strange that in the time you've been away, mostly from the TV, that Jerry Jones has relocated 3 teams?
Well, I'm never surprised or amazed about Jerry's influence in this league, and listen, the LA thing, being from LA, listen, Stan Kroenke had money. You had to have somebody who had deep pockets. If Nevada's giving away $750 million of free money, Jerry's going to be a driving force behind them taking that, even though it bothers me, the Las Vegas thing, and I shouldn't be bothered by it, but it's just, Jerry is, we all know he, and I'm not a businessman, by the way, so I can speak from that perspective that I can't ever say that I'm a visionary or that I've been a good businessman, something that he clearly is.
What about some of the trade rumors? Are there any veterans you expect to be traded this week? I mean, we've seen some high-profile guys be traded in and around the draft in recent years, and there are people, talking about Malcolm Butler, Richard Sherman, Jimmy Garoppolo. Which of these have any validity that you think might come to fruition?
Well, the Malcolm Butler one, obviously, even though, the Patriots, it's interesting, they actually, in the Brandon Cooks trade, they gave up that 32nd pick of the first round, the last pick of the first round. The Saints got it, and they apparently have wanted that pick back from the Saints for Malcolm Butler. And I don't think the same. What I've heard all along is the Saints value that 32nd pick. It's kind of like in a spot where at the end of the first round, anybody who wants to trade up and get somebody may give you a pretty good value for that pick, or if you're forced to sit there and take it, you get probably a good player and the fifth-year option on his rookie contract, which all first-rounders have a fifth-year option. So it looks like that trade has lost a little momentum, but those things can get going again on draft night and draft day. Richard Sherman, it doesn't feel like it's going to happen. He's an awfully good player. His salary is actually pretty reasonable when you think about $11 million a year for 2 years, but is he going to want a new contract? And do you want to pay that price? So I'm not counting on that trade happening. We're still waiting to see what happens with Marshawn Lynch as a signing, or whether that's a weird trade signing to part with Seattle. What's going to happen with Adrian Peterson? How about that story? That story's gone dead.
Don't you think that is going to be determined by which good team doesn't get a running back in this draft, whether that's the Patriots or I guess that'll depend on jealousy and whether.
I think that's part of it. What happens if the Saints don't do a running back and they really stick to defense? Do they take a look at that? The Patriots still have one power back to go, but we'll see. I mean, the Browns are interesting. They got Brock Osweiler. Well, are they going to cut him if they draft a quarterback? Are they really going to be able to trade him? Jake Cutler is pretty much disappeared.
My sense with Cutler is that he wants to play and he's willing to take less than typical starter money if he can get with a good team. He's sort of like, okay, to the Texans, you didn't get Tony Romo. What about me?
And I actually, I'm more of a Jay Cutler guy than anti-Jay Cutler. And, but, it just haven't felt the love there. I think you have to wait and see. It might be a case where you see if somebody gets hurt, down the line. Kirk Cousins, we don't, nobody expects him to get traded by the Redskins, even though we know that Kyle Shanahan and San Francisco would love to have him. What's the price for that? I think they'll wait that out a year. That's my guess, and that's all that is, I guess. Jimmy Garoppolo, there's no indication whatsoever that the Patriots are going to trade him. And A.J. McCarron, I think there was talk and has been some talk between the Bengals and Browns, but if you know the history there between the two franchises and Mike Brown and still bitter at the Cleveland Browns, kicking his father out, who are named the Cleveland Browns because of Paul Brown. And so there's an extra price they want on two fronts. One is for the fact that you're trading inside the division, and one because you still messed over my dad. And by the way, Johnny Manziel's still available too, but that's all status. And we haven't even mentioned Colin Kaepernick.
What about those two? What about the last two guys you mentioned? What about Kaepernick and Manziel? What do you think the chances are of either one of them playing next year?
Well, I can't believe that Kaepernick won't be on a team. But, I think Joe Thomas, the Browns' Pro Bowl left tackle, articulated a reason. And I have no doubt, by the way, I think the word blackball is probably misused here, because blackball is a conspiracy among a group to do something. I don't think there's a conspiracy, but I do think independent owners are just of the mindset, well, that guy did this, and I don't care what he says, he's not going to be on my franchise. But I think what Joe Thomas said was that if you're bringing in a guy who's probably going to be your backup quarterback, and that's what Colin Kaepernick is right now, seen as a number 2 quarterback, you don't want him dominating your locker room presence, even though they clearly have put out word that he's not going to take a knee during the national anthem this year. But I think he's too good of a talent, and I defended his right to express himself as he did. But I still think somebody will take him after this draft. We'll see where they're at. We'll see where everybody's at on it. And Johnny Manziel, look, he's got to clear up a couple of things with the NFL in terms of what his status. Who's going to sign a guy who's probably going to be a third-string quarterback who's going to facing a league discipline and still has a grievance going with the Browns over his signing bonus money? I mean, those are things that people aren't really ready to embrace.
Well, we have enjoyed this. Last thing I wanted to ask you, I know he won't have the poise that the three of us have, and it'll be a tough climb. But Romo in the booth, are you thinking this is a no-brainer? This is going to work, or how tough? I mean, this is pretty much unprecedented that someone would go directly into that number 1 analyst seat. We saw Don Meredith get into TV, but there were 3 men, or at one point there were like 4 guys in that booth. How do you think this is going to go for Tony?
I'm on the side of that. It would have been nicer if they had used the transition of either a 3-man booth or put him on a number 2 team, which is, we all know, Fox was interested in doing. And learning the craft that way. It is a difficult job. And listen, Tony is he's a football gym rat. We all know that. I know when he came out of Eastern Illinois, because I was really familiar with the story, I think he had some designs that football wasn't going to work out. I'm not going to say he wanted to be a pro golfer, but I'm saying I think TV was kind of in that circle of professions he may have pursued. And I think he did some studio stuff even at a very young age there in Dallas, didn't he? Part-time. But being in the broadcast booth and being on primetime games, I think it's going to be a transition. It's going to be tough.
And made more difficult by the fact that CBS generally covers the AFC, and that's not a conference that he's been in contact with all that often. 4 games, obviously, per year against AFC teams. And as we talked about previously, he's also going to have to cover 2 games at least 5 times during the season. So that means he has to know 4 teams in a live television broadcast several times during the course of the year. No small feat.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see. Listen, sometimes these guys are really well prepared. I talked about having, not being able to use 97% of what I have. Well, I know broadcasters who prepare for games, and it's the same thing. And they might have 15 seconds in between plays to get in a point that's in real time, and they still got producers in their ears because they got graphics they've been working on. They got to get them up. And so, we'll see how CBS does to help them along. But I thought it was too much, too soon. And for Tony's sake, I hope it goes well.
We may try and give him some reps on the podcast before he goes and begins broadcasting.
Good
for
luck
CBS.
with that.
We're that benevolent.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you guys got a long list, a waiting list there, so maybe you can get them on it.
Well, we're very pleased that you were first, and means the world to us. And if you find yourself on live TV wanting to plug the Doomsday Podcast, we'd be okay with that, Mort. And but no, we really, really appreciate this, and you have been an inspiration to a lot of folks, and I think folks that are going through similar things, and to what you have, to see you out making your comeback is going to mean a lot to them, and so we appreciate you and love you, man.
Well, it's great, guys. You're 2 great friends, and finish with just saying it's a wonderful life, and I'm looking forward to a few more days of it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mort.
You got it.
There he goes, Chris Mortensen from ESPN on the first Doomsday Podcast. Now, that's big time, Ed.
He's the best reporter ESPN's ever had on the NFL.
Wow, that's saying a lot when you're sitting across from me that you would put him ahead of yourself. And
that's not even close between me and him.
Oh, don't sell yourself short.
The only time I make the claim to the contrary is during contract negotiations.
At some point, Ed Werder, we will, on the Doomsday Podcast, there will be weeks we come in and we just go, hey, it's enough, just the two of us. It's enough for our listeners as we kind of welcome them inside and we hopefully bring them all sorts of inside information. It's enough, just the two of us. But I thought on our very first podcast, having Mort, oh my gosh, one of your heroes, one of my heroes, and as you said, I thought that was really well said. I mean, Peter King, who's been very supportive of this podcast, and Mort, two guys that you've given credit for being a huge part of your career. And getting it going, your TV career, that is, and to have to have those guys involved, and especially Peter will be on at some point. We just couldn't fit him on. We couldn't squeeze him in this week, but
he has volunteered himself for future episodes and suggested that it be sooner rather than later, or he might become quite annoyed. But
does he realize we have a limited budget? In fact, the guest budget is no longer in my pocket. It left the building with Goose Gosselin,
who used it to buy lunch in a sack, I'm sure, given what I saw in your billfold when you opened it up. I was surprised there was anything at all in there other than like a valet ticket or something.
I really do like to be a generous tipper and that kind of thing. Now, you're right, though. I'm not always. I'm found very often without what I need and having to make those horrible apologies to valet. And I try to remember to go back if I don't have the proper amount of cash and everything. I have been known to literally look in my wallet and say something to someone at the airport that's helping me, maybe with my bags or something. Although that sounds strange. I don't need a lot of help. But I'll pull out like a Sonic gift card or a Barnes & Noble gift card. And my biggest fear when I do that is always...
You give them your real credit card?
No.
Oh.
That I have used all the credit. So I've either given them like $30 of Sonic or like $0. And so that's really mean to do. And I would never mean to do something like that. It's been a remarkable first day with Rick Goose Gosselin. And I wanted to say real quick what we're going to be doing with the Doomsday Podcast. We'll be doing this once a week in the off season. If there's a huge thing that happens, we'll obviously look back at the draft next week. We'll always be ready to react. We get in the season, we're going to look to do this twice a week. And Ed, it's been really good. You're going to be, just so you can, folks will know, you're going to be heading off to, as they listen to this, you will be in New Orleans.
I'll be in New Orleans.
Okay.
I'll be covering the Saints draft live for 3 days, the day before Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday. So we'll cover them all the way through the first 3 rounds. They are a team with multiple first-round picks. They're at 11 and 32. They're a team much like the Cowboys, a team that seems to have the wherewithal to score with anybody on offense, but can their defense allow them to have enough success to compete for division titles and potentially a Super Bowl, as we saw the Saints win not so many years ago under Sean Payton as a head coach, and maybe one more before Drew Brees retires. And it'll be interesting. I think it'll be the same kind of thing the Cowboys faced last year in trying to get Tony Romo to a Super Bowl. They drafted Ezekiel Elliott to further that cause. Is Christian McCaffrey a guy that, as much as New Orleans wants to draft defense and needs to draft defense, is Christian McCaffrey a unique enough offensive talent if he's there at 11 that Sean Payton, who had his greatest success with Reggie Bush or Darren Sproles in a similar type of role that people envision for McCaffrey, would that be too much temptation for Sean Payton? We'll see on Wednesday night.
You're so right, though. When a team has that offensive identity in their DNA, even though that team that won the Super Bowl, as I recall, it wasn't a great defense. What they did do
it was a great takeaway defense with Greg Williams, who soon would be banished from the league for a period of time.
You have to affect the quarterback.
Kill the head of the snake. Buddy Ryan philosophy that he learned. But, that was it wasn't a great collection of defensive personnel, but because the offense got ahead and forced teams to play catch-up, and this was part of the Cowboys' philosophy last year, was that mistakes happen when offenses are trying in desperation because they're one-dimensional to throw the football. They make mistakes. The Saints really capitalized on that and led the NFL in creating turnovers, and they had a prolific passing quarterback in Drew Brees, and they had some balance in the run game. So they have Mark Ingram, but they really have not had a back very involved in the passing game, and that's what the thought would be if they go with Christian McCaffrey.
All right, I want us to give our picks for the Cowboys. A lot of folks are going to be, getting ready. You and I've done mock drafts in the past. You're not a big mock draft guy, but you obviously get all the information, and you'll have your informed opinion on who they'll take. There's somebody named Dr. Draft that for many years on local radio, 103.3 FM, that's an ESPN affiliate, I believe, Dr. Draft would come on and give 3 locks for the Cowboys. 3 locks.
First 3 rounds?
No. And I know this is strange, but what he would do is give 3 locks, and that helped him get the pick right because it would be one of these picks. And for about 8 to 9 years, Dr. Draft has been correct on, he gives 3 names, and if he connects on one of them, he takes full credit. So here is the thing. Charles Harris, who we've talked a lot about, the Missouri defensive end, a school that puts out a lot of defensive ends and then does not win a lot of games, although in that horrible SEC North, they've had some success. East, not North. Tre'Davious White is the other name, and King. Oh, man. Kevin King coming right out of there at Washington, the big, tall, physical corner. Keep him in mind there at 28. Ed, those are
your 3?
Those are the 3 picks there for the Cowboys.
TJ Watt. I'm going to say Tack McKinley. And I'm also going to agree with you and throw the LSU cornerback Tre'Davious White in the mix. So I do think that they're going to devote themselves to trying to get a pass rusher in the first round and a corner in the second. But if the pass rushers that they like are gone, I could see them taking Tre'Davious White, or King is another good fit, as we discussed with Rick Gosselin.
And, Ed, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to folks you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to make it available sort of on all platforms. You can email us. If you have some questions, you want to interact with us, we can do such a thing. The Doomsday Podcast at gmail.com. The Doomsday Podcast at gmail.com. If you want to reach out on Twitter, at Matt Mosley for me, at Ed Werder ESPN. Ed has a couple more followers than I do right now, but I intend on catching up with him quickly.
And if there are potential advertisers out there who are paying in cash, just reach out to me directly.
That's right. We could do this sort of any way you want to do it. Now, there's going to be a lot of isn't it fun that we have so many people, and friend Mort's one of them, Goose Gosselin, but even guys like Peter King, Wingo, Trey Wingo at ESPN, who's going to be hosting his first day one. He's done the draft for a long time, but taking over for Berman as far as the day one festivities there. We got a lot of folks out there. Ed, we don't have to pay them. We don't have to pay them.
Troy Aikman's committed to making a guest appearance.
But they're going to be tweeting this stuff out. These guys are.
Troy hasn't said he'll do that yet.
Well,
I'm working on that.
He will. We'll get that done. Now leave us a rating and a review. I want you to do that, and I would hope it would be positive, but whatever you decide.
I hope they can distinguish our voices. I don't want to be blamed for some of the things you said.
I said some slightly offensive things earlier. We certainly could edit some of that out, but leave us a rating and a review. Because I believe in some form or fashion this could be helpful to us, Ed.
And if Matt Mosley has ever given you a gift card for carrying his bags and checking them at the airport and there was no balance remaining, please let us know that too. He wants to make amends.
In the next podcast, I will tell the story of going to cover a college spring game the other day and having my cell phone fall out of my vehicle and later being able to retrieve that on a highway.
So that's why I couldn't get you to answer the phone yesterday when I was calling to tell you Mort was going to be on the show.
There will be times, you have to understand this about me.
You see what I'm dealing with here, people?
My radio cohorts in the past have known this about me. I go dark at times. I do disappear.
You're off the grid.
I'll go off the grid, and people who aren't that important can do that because sometimes
they don't get calls for weeks at a time anyway.
People don't really need me, so I'm able to do this. Listen, it's been great. It's something I can't wait to continue to do. Ed, fun having you alongside for this journey, and really can't wait. And thanks to everybody out there who's already been retweeting us and doing all that. This is the first episode of the Doomsday Podcast.
And I know you've put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate everything you've done. The caricature is really good. I hope people will have a good laugh at that. I think it's clear it is a good representation of us in a sort of exaggerated sort of way. And I'm glad that after all the auditions that you had, that you chose me to be your partner.
You're right. We went through a lot, and I'm sorry Todd Archer turned us down, but we were able to get you there. Chris Morris did that logo. Just gorgeous work. Hey, the fine folks, Keith Reynolds and his staff, TJ has been helping us today. Spoke Media has been just an enormous part of that.
And we're at Deaf Mule, are we not?
I believe
Deaf
that's
Mule
where
Studios.
I believe that's where we are.
Great logo. I love the logo.
Yeah, it looks good over here. And then I don't know if my silent business partner. Let's just call him Dennis G.
Said G is generous?
Yeah, I would say so. Thanks to him. It's been great. We'll see you next week.
Well, the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the
There are any number of reasons you might consider selling your home. To move closer to family, live within a smaller budget, or just wanting a change of scenery. Whatever your reasons, having to figure out all the various housing market trends in your area may not be what you signed up for. That's where an agent who is a realtor comes in. Realtors have the expertise to help you find the right price and navigate the process to sell your home in a way that's right for you. That's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
Price drop? Time to shop. Get to a Nordstrom Rack store today for first dibs on new markdowns. Now score even more, up to 70% off brands everyone loves at Nordstrom Rack. Denim, dresses, sneakers, tops, and more. Plus, get genius deals on jackets, sweaters, and boots for the whole family. Shop your Nordstrom Rack store today and save up to 70% with new markdowns. But hurry, deals this great won't last.